With regard to the Ukraine, I'm dating myself here. This situation is getting really hot really fast. Yesterday, as you know, Vladimir Putin announced that he's recognizing these two so-called rebel-held territories. They're really areas that over the last 8 years or so, large numbers of Russian-speaking, ethnically Russian people have basically taken control of them. Taken down radio and television stations, seized control of the local governments, and they've been running them in many ways as if they were independent republics. And Putin is saying, yeah, okay, we're going to recognize these as independent republics. He had their leaders come in and sign documents saying, da-da-da, we're in charge. And now he's offering to send them peacekeepers to protect them from Ukraine. And this is being characterized by the administration, and I think correctly, and by many in the world as an invasion of Ukraine. There's a bunch of things that could happen here, and frankly, one of the largest is China. China, up to this point, has supported Russia, and of course, President Xi and President Putin just met in China, a week and a half ago, and we don't know, how filled in on all this China is. Whether they're going along with it. I wrote an op-ed about a month ago that over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, "Is the Anti-Democracy Movement Reaching a Tipping Point in the U.S. and Around the World?" And even though I wrote it a month ago, it's basically, grounded in this conflict in Ukraine. And the question is democracy going to survive? I mean, Freedom House reported last year that the share of democracies or countries designated not free has reached its highest level since the deterioration of democracy began in a big way worldwide around 2006. And countries with declines in political rights and civil liberties outnumbered those with gains by the largest margin recorded during the 15-year period that they've been doing these studies. They downgraded the freedom scores of 73 countries. Ukraine is a democracy. Russia is only theoretically a democracy, but not a full-functioning democracy. And this is, I think in many ways, this is the core of the crisis for democracies around the world. There are these two competing worldviews, one that is held by Russia and China and many other countries, in fact, the majority of countries in the world, population-wise certainly, which is that democracy is nice to talk about, but we're the tough guys, we're the strong guys, we're in charge, and you're going to do what we say. Basically autocratic governments, and there's a whole spectrum of them, from the communist governments like South Vietnam to the communist capitalist governments like China to the openly super oligarchic governments like Russia's. I think to a certain extent the credibility, fate, and future of democracy itself is part of what's going on here. And we need to pay attention to it. So what can the United States do? And what might the world do? Well, first of all, I mentioned China a moment ago. China has been one of the strongest defenders of territorial integrity of nations historically at the United Nations for quite a long time. Now, they've done this, obviously, to protect their own interests, saying, don't invade China. We're going to defend the right of Vietnam. I mean, this goes back to the Vietnam era. The Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, things like that. In the United Nations, will China stand up? Could this be a moment that separates Russia from China, or will this bind them closer together? I'm not sure anybody knows the answer to that question. It's a certainty that this thing is going to come up before the UN Security Council, probably this, in the next couple of days, maybe even today. Russia, of course, starting in February, and I think it's already begun. I'm not quite certain, but I know in February of this year, Russia became the rotating president of the Security Council. Whether they've taken on that position or not, I'm not certain of, but whether they have or not, they have a veto. The Security Council only operates by consensus. You have to have 100, everybody has to agree or nothing happens. So even if a motion to censure Russia or something like that happens in the Security Council, Russia will veto it. But then it goes to the larger body. And at that point, it's not consensus any longer. And again, this would be a toothless proposition. But this would be the moment when China has to decide whose side they're on. Are they on the side of international order, that the boundaries of countries will be respected, or are they on the side of basically Russia and Putin? And we'll see. We'll see. The U.S., with regard to sanctions, there's a lot that can be done. We have already, right now, we have multiple sanctions on Russia. Some go back to the 2014 annexation of Crimea. Some go to Russia's military intervention in Syria. Some go to human rights abuses and political stuff like the Navalny things. None of those have been particularly draconian, but they're there. They're symbolic. But the one thing that the administration has actually talked about doing that would really bite Russia would be applying export controls of U.S. technology. I think most people think this means that Russia can't buy stuff made in the United States. But what it actually means is that Russia can't buy stuff made with parts made in the United States. So, for example, cell phones are made in South Korea and in Taiwan that are made, even though they're manufactured there, they're made with the super glass now that they're using on a lot of these phones is made by Corning here in the United States. Some of the semiconductors are made by Qualcomm. So if we did this with Huawei, with a company, but we've not done this with a country in a consequential way. If we were to say Russia may not import things made with U.S. goods in them, then Taiwan, South Korea, some of these other countries would be barred from exporting goods that they manufactured but that have U.S. stuff in them to Russia. And that technologically and consumer-wise, that could be a big hit. There's also talk about banning Russian banks from using the SWIFT system, which is the system where banks, international banks, settle their overnight transactions or their ongoing transactions. This would be a huge blow to Russia. We have done this once before. It was done in 2012 to Iran, and it crippled their economy. More than half the world's high-value cross-border financial transactions use the SWIFT network. So, we'll see if that happens. And then there are targeted sanctions on Russian oligarchs or Russian senior officials, the people that Putin relies on to keep in power. So far, we have done that. We've never done this with Russia, but we have done personal sanctions with Bashar al-Assad, with Saddam Hussein, with Robert Mugabe, and with Slobodan Milosevic. If we were to include Putin and or his oligarchs in that list, it could be a significant blow. I don't think that any of these things are going to be enough, though, to stop Russia from certainly from taking the Donbass. That looks like it's a done deal. And queuing up to take the rest of Ukraine. Keep in mind, Ukraine is one of the 5 largest producers of wheat in the world. It is the largest country geographically in the European Union. It's huge. And they have, one of the largest pipelines for Russian oil and natural gas from Russia to Europe goes through Ukraine. Now, Russia started dialing back the movement of fossil fuels through those pipelines in January last month, presumably in anticipation of this.